The truth behind Custer's last stand was uncovered through Red Bear's firsthand testimony. A seasoned scout, Red Bear recounts the intense moments of the Battle of Little Bighorn in a gripping narrative. With raw honesty, he describes the chaos of gunshots, arrows slicing through the air, and the fierce war cries that mark this historic clash between two civilizations. Having ridden with Custer's 7th Cavalry, Red Bear provides a unique viewpoint on the cultural struggle that defined the American frontier. His powerful retelling plunges you into the heart of the conflict, where the destiny of a nation hung in the balance. So sit back and join us as we delve into this captivating story. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Custer had ordered the charge, instructing the scouts to drive off the Dakota horses from their camp. By the time Red Bear reached the solitary teepee, the other scouts were already circling it, lashing at it with their whips. The scouts had raced down the dry gulch. They paused at the lodge for nearly half an hour when Red Bear caught up. "Plenty of supplies here," remarked one of the men. One feather stepped inside the tent, sampling the meat and tasting the soup meant for a fallen Dakota warrior. Suddenly, Custer and Fred Gerard appeared, shouting, "You were meant to push straight into the Sioux village." Having outpaced his troops, Custer scolded the scouts, both with words and force, as they examined the teepee. "I told you to advance, not stall," he snapped. "You've disobeyed me. Let the soldiers take the lead. Fall back." Custer then threatened, "If any of you show cowardice, I'll strip you of your weapons and brand you a woman." A scout shot back, "Tell him if he does that to his own white men who hesitate, it'll keep him busy, just like us." Laughing, the scouts made it clear they were ready to fight. They pressed forward, but Red Bear noticed Custer and his men veer right, about 50 yards past the lone teepee. Alongside Gerard, the scouts included Goose, Young Hawk, Little Sioux, Bobtailed Bull, Forked Horn, Red Foolish Bear, Boy Chief, Little Brave, Bloody Knife, Strikes 2, Black Fox, Red Star, and One Feather. They raced toward the Little Bighorn, nearing the Dakota camp as they forded the river. After crossing, they split up once more. With Dakota horses grazing near the trees, 6 scouts swung sharply to the right. Boy Chief and Red Star were followed by Strikes 2, Black Fox, Little Sioux, and One Feather. Meanwhile, Bloody Knife's group pushed toward the edge of the camp. Bloody Knife suddenly reappeared in the distance, leading 3 horses. "Someone take these horses back to the hill," he called. "I'm keeping one for myself." The thick dust obscured Red Bear's view, but he soon recognized Bloody Knife. This group consisted of Little Brave, Red Bear, Bobtailed Bull, Goose, Forked Horn, Young Hawk, Bloody Knife, and 2 Crow scouts. They regrouped near the edge of the Sioux camp and opened fire with their carbines. Dismounting, they took aim while Dakota warriors, hidden among the bluffs, returned fire. No one remained on horseback now. The 2 sides exchanged shots across a gap of less than a quarter mile. Near the tree line, Forked Horn shouted, "This way!" As they moved toward the ford leading to the Dakota village, the soldiers finally caught up. Red Bear saw troops forming a defensive line across the river to his right while shifting leftward. Chaos reigned. None of the officers or soldiers acknowledged him. Still mounted, the soldiers stood ready alongside the scouts when Bloody Knife yelled about the horses. Red Bear spurred his horse toward Forked Horn, who was shouting orders. As he dismounted, Red Bear spotted a Dakota horse, wounded in the neck or cheek, galloping toward Young Hawk's position. "I hit an enemy's horse," Young Hawk declared, striking the animal. Around them, white soldiers shouted in frenzy. Moments later, Little Hawk rode up to Red Bear. "Uncle, I shot that bay horse. It's mine now," he said. "Take it. Do you have a rope? It's yours to keep." Red Bear shook his head. "What's the use? We're in a fight for our lives. It won't do me any good." With that, Young Hawk wheeled his horse and rode off. Suddenly, Little Brave emerged from the trees, warning that the Dakotas were preparing to charge. "They outnumber us," he urged. "Let me fire one shot into their camp before we fall back to the hill." Red Bear steadied Little Brave's horse as he dismounted to face the onslaught. Little Brave insisted Red Bear remount and retreat toward the timber before crossing the river. No sooner had Little Brave rejoined him Then gunfire erupted from an ambush just beyond the Little Bighorn. Dakota fighters concealed in the brush fired from the ground. The scouts retreated to their original position. There they saw a massive force of Dakota horsemen thundering toward the ford between the ridge and the river, howling and shooting as they advanced. They seemed everywhere at once. Under heavy fire, Red Bear dismounted and dragged his horse forward until a low-hanging branch snagged the saddle horn, jerking them to a halt. The saddle girth snapped, scattering his spare cartridges, but he yanked the horse's head until it lurched ahead. Twice he tried to remount, only to be thrown when his canteen tangled beneath him. Finally, he succeeded and galloped after Little Brave, who had raced ahead without dismounting. As Red Bear cleared the trees, he lost sight of him in the haze of dust and gun smoke, glimpsing only a shadowy rider in the distance. Then he spotted 10 soldiers fleeing into the woods, their horses stumbling over a deep ravine. He heard their shouts as the animals faltered. Swerving left to avoid the gully, he left the skirmish behind, chasing the faint figure ahead, until it veered sharply left. Certain it wasn't Little Brave, Red Bear rode straight past the turn. His horse staggered, then collapsed, hurling him to the ground. As the animal bolted toward the river, Red Bear gave chase. The horse finally halted when a dry branch tangled in its bridle, dragging behind it through the open area, dotted with rose bushes and scattered trees. Red Bear reached the panicked animal, but gripping his rifle in his right hand made it difficult to control the thrashing horse with only his left. Suddenly, a painted Dakota warrior came charging downstream toward him on his right flank. The warrior's face was streaked with yellow above and crimson below, his eyes and forehead also daubed in yellow. Red Bear fired, and the Dakota toppled from his mount. The riderless horse spun, reared, and fled. Now only 2 sounds filled the air: the Dakota's piercing whistles and the relentless crack of carbines. Red Bear saw his own horse plunging into the river. He waded in after it, swimming until he seized the mane. As he emerged, he spotted the Dakota horse he'd shot swimming behind him, its dark bay coat glistening, a rattling deer hoof necklace around its neck, and a white blaze marking its forehead. The animal crossed upstream, just ahead of him. Nearby, Little Brave had already reached the far bank, blood soaking his side from a wound below his right shoulder. His horse, though unharmed, ambled toward the ridge instead of returning to Red Bear. Hoping to drive the Dakota horse toward Little Brave, Red Bear pressed forward. Then from the downstream thickets to his left, Bobtail Bull's horse burst into view, mane and tail whipping, reins and rope flapping wildly. The terrified animal blew past Red Bear, close enough to touch. The saddle's front was streaked with blood. 5 or 6 soldiers emerged from the brush behind it, having just forded the river. Some chased after the Dakota horse Red Bear rode, while Little Brave, still mounted but moving cautiously, signaled for him to be careful. Dakota bullets rained down from the slopes above. Red Bear interpreted Little Brave's gesture as a plea for a fresh horse. His own was spent. Dismounting, Red Bear grabbed for a loose rope trailing from either Bobtail Bull's horse or the Dakota mount. But the spooked animal yanked him into the brambles, tearing his bare feet on rose thorns, his moccasins lost in the river earlier. As Little Brave and the others galloped toward the Dakota line, the horse dragged Red Bear upstream along the ridge's edge. Finally, he freed himself from the rope and scrambled back onto his own horse. Believing all soldiers had perished after losing sight of Little Brave, Red Bear pressed toward the ridge, only to discover more troops in frantic retreat. At their head rode Reno, wild-eyed with terror, a white handkerchief tied around his forehead, froth flecking his beard. When Reno's men raised their carbines, mistaking Red Bear for a Dakota warrior, he spurred forward, shouting, "Scout! Scout!" and slapped Reno's chest with an open palm. "The Sioux! The Sioux!" Reno screamed in response. Red Bear pointed down the ridge to mark the enemy's position. A sergeant named John tossed Red Bear spare cartridges as the disorganized soldiers fired wildly uphill at Dakota fighters. A stray bullet tore through Red Bear's coat near the armpit. Spotting a wounded Dakota horse charging their lines, he tried to rope it, but the soldiers gunned it down. Though Reno briefly rallied his men, the Dakotas soon broke off their attack. 7 scouts remained missing, but the survivors, Goose, Red Foolish Bear, Bobtail Bull, Forked Horn, Bloody Knife, and Young Hawk, regrouped with the troops. Little Brave reappeared, riding stiffly from his wounds. As Red Bear remounted, Dakota Scout White Cloud approached, reporting that Iroquois scouts had captured Dakota horses but not yet returned. White Cloud urged joining them, and together they gathered 3 horses, 2 led by Red Bear, 1 by White Cloud. 4 distant riders spurred a cautious retreat until recognition dawned. They were Crow Scouts, identifiable by the red paint on their white shirts. The Crows shared grim news. 2 of their party lay dead on the ridge, and they meant to recover the bodies. After a fruitless wait, Red Bear and White Cloud rejoined Reno's position. Other scouts soon arrived with reinforcements. Strikes 2, Red Star, Boy Chief, One Feather, Soldier, Stabbed, Strikes the Lodge, and Little Sioux. Later, a second wave brought 40 captured horses, herded by Charging Bull, Red Wolf, and White Eagle. The scouts congregated 10 rods downhill from the soldiers. Stabbed, circling on horseback, voiced their dilemma. "Brothers, why do we linger? If we're defeated, we must follow Custer's last orders." Stabbed reminded the group of Custer's final orders. "Fall back to Powder River. Our wagons and supplies await there." Pretty Face, arriving from the pack mule train, though Red Bear hadn't seen it, joined them, likely returning with the herd scouts. No officers were visible. The surviving soldiers sat slumped on their horses, half dismounted. Relieved to reunite with fellow scouts, Red Bear mourned the 7 lost comrades. While most scouts stayed to hold off the Dakotas, Stabbed organized a detachment: Bull in the Water, Charging Bull, Red Wolf, White Eagle, Red Star, Pretty Face, One Feather, PTAT, a Dakota Scout, and Red Bear, to drive the captured horse herd towards safety. Left behind to defend were Strikes 2, Stabbed, Soldier, Boy Chief, Strikes the Lodge, Little Sioux, White Cloud, Sioux, and Dakota Scouts including Bull, ESC, and interpreter Half-Breed. Bear Waiting and Metaxa, another Dakota Scout, reinforced them just as the horse herd moved out. By dusk, Red Bear's group had traveled 6 miles past the lone teepee, retracing their morning path. With Dakota war parties destroying camps behind them, Strikes 2 sent Bull to urge the herd faster. After dark, Red Wolf and Bull in the Water rode ahead as scouts. 3 gunshots shattered the night. The scouts tightened formation, galloping until they reached Rosebud Valley. The advanced scouts wheeled back, warning of closing Dakota riders. Mounting fresh horses, the group drove the herd harder, dust clouds betraying pursuers. Exhausted, they finally spotted a timberline ahead. One scout found a muddied waterhole beyond a cut bank. They slid down, scooping water with their hands while the thirsty horses stamped nearby. Whole Buffalo, claiming knowledge of the route, led them onward until midnight, when they reached the Rosebud River. Dawn found them near present-day Cheyenne Agency. From a high peak overlooking the Dakota Sundance grounds, the Dakota Scouts advised a daylight halt to survey the terrain. Some slept, others kept watch. At dusk, they rode again, reaching by sunrise the camp where Bloody Knife had once drunk himself senseless. Among the abandoned supplies, they scavenged hardtack and beef for breakfast. Crossing the Rosebud, they found Stabb's group had preceded them, identified by the prints of Stabb's mule. After following the Rosebud to its mouth, Red Bear's group discovered the remnants of a recent campsite, scattered cooking tins, and the cold ashes of a morning fire. Recognizing this as the soldiers' breakfast ground, they scavenged what they could, loading salvaged hardtack onto their saddles before pressing onward. Ahead, Strikes 2's party mistook them for Dakota riders and spurred their horses into a frantic retreat, soon vanishing from sight. Red Bear's men, moving cautiously along Custer's old trail, made camp in a wooded ridge near the Tongue River. At dawn, they forded the river, passing the grim sight of a soldier's body, his skull crushed by a war club. By midday, they reached the Powder River encampment. There, they found Strikes 2's group, a wagon train, and an infantry company sent from Fort Beaufort under the command of an officer known as Wearer of the White Hat. Through interpreters, Santee, Crowbear, and the half-Dakota scout Entra, the scouts relayed the battle's details to the officer. 2 scouts, Foolish Bear and White Cloud, were chosen to deliver messages via a waiting steamboat to the Elk-Yellowstone River's mouth. Equipped with carbines and a message bag, they rafted across the river, while Strikes 2 and Bull later crossed to carry dispatches to Fort Beaufort. White Cloud and Foolish Bear eventually rejoined the group, though Red Bear noted bitterly that Little Brave, and likely all of Custer's men, were lost. This first-hand account sheds light on the chaos and courage of the 1876 Great Sioux War and the Battle of Little Bighorn. For more vivid narratives of history's defining conflicts, stay tuned, like and subscribe to this channel. We'll delve deeper in future videos.